thank everyone for coming today for the fourth session of Beyond the Classroom Parent Training. My name is Elaine Osborne. I'm an instructional coach here at Frisco ISD. I wanted to start off the training today by kind of introducing our parents that are here and the teachers that are here as well. So, hi.
Hi, my name is Megan Jackson. My daughter is Abigail Jackson. She's 3 years old and she's in Miss Lindsay's class.
Hi.
Did you say Abigail?
Yes. Yes, yeah.
Hi, Abigail.
My name is Juanita. My son's in Lindsay's class. His name is Morgan Craig. He'll be 5 in May. In May.
Oh, got to go on to elementary school, kindergarten.
My name is Colleen, and my son is Ethan Dakowitz. He is 10 and a half, and I'm sure you don't remember, but I do, that you worked with him for 2 days when he was like 5. He used to go to Sim.
I remember Ethan.
And worked with him, and I thought you'd known him his whole life because it was so impressive and amazing. So thank you for that.
Well, it was my privilege, and I still remember him very vividly.
Hi, my daughter is Sonia. She's also in Mrs. Lindsay's class. She's 4.
You got the crowd. Hi.
My name is Anita. My son he goes to Reedy High School, Jerry Moore, and his teacher is Miss Price.
Tell me your child.
Jerry.
Jerry. Yeah. I've had the pleasure of meeting Jerry as well. Yeah.
So, go ahead. Let's teachers introduce themselves.
Elaine.
Is a nationally renowned consultant for the American Printing House for the Blind, and also we're lucky to say here for Frisco ISD, working with students with sensory motor deaf blindness, and she has been gracious enough to come and present to us today on your students, our students, your kids. Okay? All right, so thank you.
Thanks, Elaine. And I'd like us to take that word presentation very loosely for the hour we spend together, an hour and a half, because I really want this to be driven by your questions and needs. I do have a PowerPoint presentation, but it's not my intention to go through slide by slide. I'm using it mainly just to organize input, and what I would love is, as I bring up topics, if you would ask questions or make comments about how this relates to your child or your student, whichever. That's how I'd like us to spend our time. So I'll use this just to get us started. This term arousal states may be something that's new to you. Parents, are you at all familiar with this term, arousal states? It's something that is very, very, very significant to your children in terms of the quality of their learning, how efficiently they learn. And I wanted to use this as the basis of our discussion because this issue of arousal states is absolutely essential to learning that takes place in the classroom, but it's also absolutely essential to learning that takes place in the home. It's kind of the bedrock, it's the foundation for making learning happen in any environment. I was at the library on El Dorado before I met Elaine for a bite to eat before the session started. And everybody was busy, and I stopped in there to send you the email of a PowerPoint. And you know how libraries are. And everything was going great, and there was a dad there with a little girl who I guess, I could see her diaper under her pants, so I'm guessing she was probably about 2. And she was busy with the DVD cases, the movie cases, and it was so cute. She was pulling them off the shelf just as fast as she could reach them and holding them up to her dad, and every one she held up, the expression on her face said, "Oh, Dad, can you believe what I found?" And her expectation was that he was going to say, "Great, let's take it home, honey." And when he didn't do that and put it back on the shelf, she had a huge meltdown. That's an arousal state issue. So let me explain, and I'm parents, I know you can relate to this at home. Everything doesn't go perfectly. I'm sure you've experienced the occasional arousal state shift in your homes. So what are they? There are, if you look at different research, different researchers have different numbers of arousal states. What it basically means is these are levels of attention, and they go from very little, almost no attention, well, none really, on up to the levels of arousal where learning can occur. So this is like, if you'll think of this as like a continuum. And by the way, this is not just true for learners in special education classrooms. This is true for all of us. It's true for us in this room today. So here's the deal. Here's how arousal states go. The state at which there's the least amount of attention and no learning occurs is asleep. And just looking around, I don't see anybody who's there right now, but I bet there are people in this room who'd like to be there. So what we know from neurological research is that you don't learn new stuff when you're asleep. There is something really important that happens during sleep, though, and that is that what happens when we're asleep is we rearrange things we've already learned. I think that's fascinating. While we're asleep at night, what we're busy doing is taking this thing we learned and this thing we learned and seeing how they're related and rearranging them. So sleep is important, but new learning doesn't occur in sleep. So the next stage up from sleep is called drowsy. Let me check you out. Either nobody's drowsy right now or you're really good at faking it. And we're highly socialized people, so it's possible somebody in here is really drowsy right now. Drowsy, when your children are drowsy, they learn a little bit every once in a while, but not very much and not efficiently. So drowsy is not a good place to be for learning. The next state up from drowsy is called quiet alert. And that's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of you are quiet alert right now. Quiet alert means that you're paying attention to something. When you're paying, and hopefully it's me, I mean, I'd like to think that's true. If you're paying attention to something, learning is occurring. 3 of you are the next one up from that, which is called active alert. And let's see, those of you who are taking notes, who are writing, are active alert. Your quiet alert is just passive, taking things in. You're just sitting and listening. Active alert is you're interacting with your learning media somehow. So if you're taking notes right now, you're active alert. Now, things go uphill from sleepy, drowsy to quiet alert and active alert, and then things go downhill, and we go back into arousal states that are not helpful for learning. Fussy is if you go past active alert and you're too aroused, you go to fussy. And fussy is just like drowsy. I'm pointing at this screen, I should be pointing here. Fussy is just like drowsy. A little bit of learning can take place with fussy, but not very much and not easily. It's very inefficient. And then if you keep getting more stimulated from fussy, you go to agitated. And agitated is like asleep. No learning occurs in agitated. So one of the most powerful things you can do in the home environment is to see how much time you can create for your child in the home environment where they can be quiet alert and active alert, because that's where learning happens. Quiet alert and active alert. And I'm just curious if any of you can think of all of you do it. I mean, that goes without saying, but you may not have been doing it consciously. Can anybody give me an example of something that you do with your child in the home environment that you know is going to put them in the place you want them for learning, either quiet alert or active alert. Yeah. Eating?
Activity that I do, I have a song for my child, and with the song I can see his face change completely.
Yes.
Even before the start the activity is, I start to thinking first, he knows what is coming.
Exactly. That's a perfect example. And would he be, when that happens, is he quiet alert, paying attention to what you do, or does he try to do something too?
No, it's quiet alert.
Quiet alert.
Paying
Okay.
attention.
Do you ever see active alert at home? Where he tries to interact with you or his materials?
With me, most of like he's unverbal, but he make cues that I can tell he try to interact with me, and he changed the tone so.
That's it. Yep. Yep. That is active alert. What he's trying to, he is engaging in a behavior to engage you in a social interaction with him. That's active alert. I saw him be active alert with Miss Jefferson. And what he did with Miss Jefferson was when she showed him his toothbrush, he opened his mouth to let her know that he was ready to have his teeth brushed. The opening his mouth was action. That was active alert. He had an active response to the object, his toothbrush. Yeah. So parents, Abigail, anything? Where do you get active alert or quiet alert?
Probably with music. She's only with Jake and Neverland Pirates. She's very particular with.
This is a selective attender.
Yes.
It's so funny. There are lots of discussions in cognitive psychology about whether paying attention is a skill. Of course it's a skill. It's something you have to do on purpose. Anytime you're deciding to pay attention to one thing and to ignore something else, that's a skill. You all are all using it right now. You've got phones in your purses that have probably beeped or vibrated since you walked in here, and you'd like very much to see what happened on your phone. And you are paying selective attention to me instead. That's a skill. One I appreciate, by the way. So, okay, yeah, music's a great example. What is, I've forgotten your child's name. I'm so sorry.
You're fine. Abigail.
Oh, I thought you were Abigail. I'm so sorry. I think I called you.
I'm Megan. I'm Megan.
Megan, I'm so sorry. Thank you. Megan, what is Abigail letting you know, obviously she is, what music she wants and what music she doesn't want?
Yes.
And how is she doing it? Facial expression, vocalization?
Vocalization, she'll get real fussy.
Okay, great, great. Mom, you and this music can get out of here on the horse you rode in on. I'd rather have, yes. Okay, very good. Using vocalization to communicate, to send you a message is active alert. It's fabulous. It's an active alert communication skill. Juanita, anything come to mind?
With Morgan, anytime he hears certain TV shows or
Wow.
some YouTube videos that he likes, he's like, okay, where's the iPad, where's the phone, and he'll try to reach for it if you have it, if you can see it.
This is a very active alert learner. Okay.
These are when I talked to you about the vocab cards.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. So we often, and let me just point out something here, because I know that not all of your children have the same kind of motor skills and may not actually be able to use their hands to reach for something. So the point here is that you don't have to have hand use to be active. You can be active with your voice, you can be active with your eyes, you can be active with your facial expression. There are lots of ways to be actively engaged with learning media that don't involve reaching and using the hands. And they all count.
With Ethan, we have this giant spinning wheel. We have a routine that we do every night, and we lay him on the wheel, and we spin him in each direction and those things. So he's so used to that now, and we do other stuff that as soon as we go up into the area where we do that, he'll crawl up on the wheel, and lay down like he's supposed to. because he knows that's what we do. He's very routine driven.
That's a great example of active alert.
Yeah.
Fantastic. That what you all are describing to me is learners who are just exactly where you want them for learning to occur. What we need to move forward with is, what are they going to learn? When you've got them in that place, and when you've got them in the neurologically, and that's what these are, neurological states. When you've got them neurologically where they need to be for learning, what are we going to teach them? So how about your guy?
Sonia, my daughter, I think anything on iPad
Okay.
really gets her attention. So her apps, she always brings it to me, and then she wants me to hold her hand for support. And then she wants to pick an app.
And she's trying to touch the icons?
Yeah, and then she wants to do it, but she wants me to
Okay.
give her a little time.
Yeah, support is perfectly fine to provide, and they still get credit for being active alert when they need support. If she understands what she wants to do, our favorite word, Janice, if she has the idea and the intention to do it, she gets credit for being active alert. That's beautiful. And how about you?
Well, when it comes to feeding, my son, he responds to the microwave. So even if it's not food that's coming out of the microwave, I'll sometimes put the microwave on for a few seconds and he'll come.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
And he'll come running into me.
Great. Yeah, that's a perfect example of active alert. Okay, good. So this is what we need for learning. When active alert is where you're paying intense attention. Once you've got intense attention with quiet alert arousal state, then you move into, with however much assistance is needed, you move into active alert. Now, the action is very important, and let me just, we'll move on, but I want you to really get the significance of this. This is what, we're learning so much from neurology right now about how learning happens. And here's what we know now, is that when your child has the idea, I want to, and has the intention to do something with an object, the chemistry in your child's brain changes. There's literally a release of certain hormones and chemicals in the cells in the brain that cause long-term memory storage. You get high quality learning, which is what long-term memory storage is. Your son remembers what the microwave is and what it does. That's long-term memory storage. That's learning. The way he gets that is by having an intention, an idea, an intention of something he wants to do with the microwave. That's active learning. Now here's the beauty part. He doesn't have to be able to physically do it. The understanding, the learning, the long-term memory storage, the comprehension of his world and what things are and what things do in his world comes from just having the intention to do it. He doesn't have to actually physically be able to do it. We'll come back to that later. So do not think that because you're helping your Matthew do something, it's not important. In terms of how much Matthew understands about his world and what's happening to him, he's getting as much learning out of it as though he actually physically did it. As long as he knows what's happened and he has an intention to make something happen. Doesn't matter if he can physically do it or not. Neurologists do the most amazing things. This study blew me away, and I had been a teacher for a long time when I found this out. And I was a life skills teacher, and this was years ago, and the thinking in life skills classes was that if a learner couldn't actually hold the spoon and stir the cookie dough, then they weren't life skills material. What we know now is that you're making cookies if you understand what the spoon does. Do you get the difference? Whether or not you can hold onto the spoon and stir. You're making cookies if you understand what the spoon does. Yes?
I was just gonna say, we've been like just a little like, oh, how can we move this needle for Ethan? Because when he wants the TV changed, he will go find the remote, he'll kind of shake it at the TV, and then he brings it to somebody. And then we've just been sad thinking, are we ever gonna get him to this point where he's gonna know, I don't always know what button to push on the stupid TV
Right.
remote, you know?
Right.
So we're going to get there, and it's just encouraging to hear that he has all of that there, so whether he can push that button or not, and has the dexterity and whatever, it's still all that learning is there.
So let me tell you what the bottom line is, what the secret to happiness in life is. Anybody want to know the secret to happiness? And this is true for all of us, whether we have a disability or not. The secret to happiness is understanding what's going on in your world and having as much control over it as you can. That's the secret to a high quality of life. So what you're trying to do with your children is give them as much understanding as you possibly can about what is happening in your home and how they can have some control over some of those things that happen in your home. Ethan understands that that thing is a tool for getting what he wants on the TV. He understands that. That gives him a huge step up in terms of quality of life in your home. Does he have to know what buttons to push? It would be wonderful. I wish I knew what buttons to push. I'm totally in your camp. Remote controls have gotten much smarter than I am. That would be lovely. But here's the best definition of, I think, what life skills really is for a population of learners, what I call fragile learners. It's being a good consumer of the help provided to you. Being a good consumer of the help provided to you. So what that means is that if your child can push the buttons, what you go for is your child being able to bring you the remote, hand it to you and point to the TV, and whether he can speak, whether he can do picture exchange or anything else, what that child has just done is been a very good consumer of the help that you can provide to him. The message is clear. Help me get what I want on the TV. Does that make sense? Okay. So any questions about arousal states and how they relate to learning? I'm sure that if I took the time to do it and went out of the room and asked each of you to give me an example of drowsy, you could think of a time during the day at home when your child is less than available for learning, is drowsy, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's going to happen. It should happen. Everybody needs to conk out and rest. I'm sure you could give me examples of when they're fussy and agitated. There are things that come up. It might be toothbrushing for you. It might be going to the doctor's office. There are times when things are not going to go real smoothly. So what we're looking for is as much quiet alert and active alert as you can get. So just a heads up for you guys. Hi, Tammy. We're moving out of a very old-fashioned way of looking at learning. It used to be defined by a word called intelligence, and this is an old theory that isn't a part of our schools, the environment of our schools very much anymore, especially for learners with disabilities, and that's a very good thing. It was based on the idea that everybody was born with a certain capacity for learning, and it never changed through an individual's life. And we know from lots of research that's just not true. And so what we're thinking about now in our schools is not this static intelligence capacity anymore, but rather cognition. And so what we're looking at now is, where is your learner in the cognitive hierarchy of skills, and what can we do to get them to the next level? And so the thing about looking at cognition rather than intelligence is that cognition is dynamic, it changes over time, and we know that, and evidence supports that. Cognition is affected by the quantity and quality of the experiences that you have in life. And that's true for us, and it's true for your children. So we're looking at cognitive development and the kinds of experiences that facilitate growth in that area. And, you know, it's just one other thing that I'll put out on the table for you. In terms of testing, what results show from research is that testing results are pretty reliable with typical children. Have you ever heard of something called the bell curve? And under the bell are all the typical guys, and the gifted and talented are sort of out on one end, and the cognitively or intellectually disabled are kind of out on the other end. They aren't under the curve. So testing results are pretty valid and predictive under the bell. And they're notoriously unpredictable on either end. On either end. So what we always need to keep in mind is the best thing to go with is behavioral observation for your children. Where are they now? A behaviorally evidence-based present level of performance, and then the next steps beyond that. For learning, what you should be going for with learning with your children is this amazing thing called the ZPD, the Zone of Proximal Development. And I know that's a mouthful, but it isn't as hard as it sounds. It simply says that the best learning will take place for your children when you start with a skill they already have and then stretch that skill. That's the best learning. Take a skill they already have and then stretch it. What doesn't work well is taking a skill where they are and then, as this, I love this quote, Jacobs, what he says doesn't work is taking a leap beyond the horizon of the learner's awareness. So in asking them to learn about something, you're stretching where they are. You aren't leaping off into something beyond their level of awareness. Where does this learning take place? Where does that stretching take place? It takes place in that neurological land of quiet and active alert. So, as much as possible in the home environment, you're going to be trying, as much as your learner has the stamina for, you're going to be trying to give them a high quantity of learning experiences and high quality learning experiences. And what does that mean? For typical children, they have billions of sensory experiences in their infancy and toddlerhood, billions of sensory experiences. Now, what happens with a lot of your children is that they aren't typical. So they don't react to sensory input the way typical children necessarily react to it. So it may be harder, much harder for you to get the same quantity. Those of you who have had occupational therapy services for your children may have heard your occupational therapists about being sensory seeking or sensory avoidant. Have you heard those terms? Yeah. What it means is that your children may have a more difficult time processing sensory input. And if it's too complex, they may avoid it. If they avoid it, then they aren't getting the quantity that a typical child would get. And our challenge then is to give them sensory experiences with the qualities, to make sure that the sensory experiences provided to them by us have the qualities that make them seek more rather than avoid. Does anybody think of an example with your child? You talked about music. Is there, have you ever sort of formed any ideas about why Matthew likes certain music and not other music? Why he seeks some and avoids others?
About the music, not exactly, because we have certain routines that I do. Before going to bed, I do certain routines.
So familiarity.
He's familiar because I'm doing it for years, and he waits. He knows this the time is coming. You can see in his facial expression is coming.
And then, does it matter what music you play?
No.
Okay.
It doesn't, no, it's a repetition, the same song that I have. So the repetition made him think, even his eyes, he put a face like attention face. Oh, I know what is coming. But talking about videos, like if I put videos, is he watch it for, I would say, like a couple of weeks? If you put it, I try just to see his face.
Yes.
Same over and over.
Yes.
He start constantly, as soon as you put it in, a song or noise come on, he would, and turn his head like this, and no. He already know, he already is over about this, don't even, put it, if I don't want to even hear.
So he's recognizing it and he knows he doesn't want it. Do you know why he doesn't want it?
Oh, why? Because the saying is boring.
Yeah, habituation. Yeah. It's too familiar. Too familiar. Yeah. I will never forget a wonderful young woman that I had the pleasure of working with a few years ago, and we did an assessment with her to find out what she liked, what she wanted more of, what she was seeking, so we could give her more experiences, and what she was avoidant, what she didn't like. And music was listed on her assessment, that she liked music. So her teacher pulled out this CD of, I don't know, it was pop music. I can't remember what it was, but it was hard rock. And put it on, and she got fussy, and as the music went on, the fussiness increased, and she was getting agitated. And I said, you'll have to turn that off. You don't keep exposing a child to something that's making them fussy or agitated. They'll shut down more. They'll avoid more experiences if they have to engage in something that they find aversive. So we turned the music off. The person who had done the assessment was in the room with us. It was one of the diagnosticians in the school. And she said, well, that's funny because she loved music when I played it for her. And I said, well, what did you play? And she thought for a minute, and she said, well, it was Chopin. It was classical piano music. And we put that on, and sure enough, she was in heaven. She adored it. The difference was complexity. The rock music was voices and musical instruments. It was 4 different musical instruments. It was very complex. The classical piano music was 1 instrument, no voice. It was very simple. She liked the simple music, and the complex music she couldn't tolerate. Those kinds of very subtle little differences in reactions and responses to things going on in your home will make the difference between your child seeking more experiences or withdrawing and trying to avoid experiences. The 2 most complexity is usually the big issue. The 2 most complex environments I can think of are homes and schools. Think about your home. Is your TV on? Is music on in somebody else's room? Are people talking to each other? Is the dog barking? The telephone ringing? Most homes are incredibly complex. One of the things that you may have to think about in your home environment in order for your child to be able to be quiet, alert, and pay attention selectively to one thing, to learn something, is that you may have to reduce complexity. Somebody may have to turn off their TV and their telephone for a minute or 2. And then you've got fussy, agitated, typical siblings, right? So, what skills are we looking for in active learning classrooms? We're looking for sensory motor skills. There are 3 global stages of cognitive skill development. And sensory motor skills are skills that are learned by typically developing 0 to 2-year-olds. Pre-operational skills are skills being learned by typically developing 2 to 11-year-olds. And operational skills are skills being learned by typically developing 11-year-olds and up. Oh, and there's a mistake on the slide. It shouldn't say 11, it should say 7. 2 to 7, and I meant to change that. This is an older PowerPoint, and I hadn't noticed that I hadn't changed that. 2 to 7. So at the sensory motor stage, this is why I'm talking so much about arousal states and about the quantity and quality of experiences. What your children are doing at the sensory motor stage is learning as much as they can about the objects and the people and the actions, what's going on in the world around them. And they do that by exploring and having these experiences, this high quality, high quantity experiences with the things around them. Don't think that because your child may be at the sensory motor level predominantly at this stage of his life, that will necessarily be where he is always. But here's what you need to know. If your child has essential learning that needs to take place at the sensory motor stage, if your child doesn't know a whole lot about his home environment and what's going on in it, and his school environment and what's going on in it, then he has very, very essential, important sensory motor stage learning to achieve. The more sensory motor stage, the better his sensory motor stage foundation, then the better his learning will be at the subsequent stages. So this sensory motor stage learning is what I call foundational learning. And here's why it's so important. Let me say it again one more time. If you don't have that sensory motor foundation, then your world is incoherent. If you don't have that sensory motor foundation, the world you live in doesn't make any sense to you. It's like if I picked you up and you'd never been to Logan International Airport in Boston, Massachusetts in your life, and for some reason I got you on an airplane and shoved you out into that airport and said, good luck. That's a terrible place to be. You don't have any information about Boston Logan International Airport. You don't know how to negotiate that airport. Everything about it would be strange and scary. When you don't comprehend the environment that you're in, it is scary. That's a neurological given. You have no choice about it. If it's overwhelming to you, it is frightening. If you are living in environments that don't make sense to you and are stressful and scary, you cannot learn. I don't care how wonderful counting and ABCs are. If you don't have that fundamental understanding of your environment and what is going on in it, you cannot be quiet alert and active alert and attentive to pre-operational and academic skills. The foundation of understanding has to be laid first. Does that make sense? Any comments or questions about that?
My question will be, you need to talk about, like, this is the kitchen. You need to present him pots, I don't know, plates.
You got it. Listen, I want you to think about it this way, parents. And I know this is a tall order, and nobody will ever be able to do everything about what I'm about to say. But anything your child hears you doing, he needs to understand what that is. If you hear noises around you and you don't know what's making the noise, it creates stress. That's the biggest source of lack of comprehension and avoidance. Remember, if you're avoiding sensory input, you're not learning. You can't learn about anything at any of these levels if you're avoiding input. The biggest contributor to feeling fussy or agitated or shutting down in an environment that you don't understand is hearing sounds that you don't know the sources of. Neurologists call this the thing that goes bump in the night phenomenon. It's fascinating to me. And they do this research on typical people. I mean, like, you know, us. I don't know how typical I am, but I'd probably be in the Bell. And what they do is they wire them up, look at the electrical activity in the brain, and they look at the cortisol levels, the stress hormone in the saliva. And what happens is that when something wakes you up in the middle of the night, you have a surge of cortisol, stress hormones, that just surge through your body. And you can relate to this. When something wakes you up at night, first of all, you have that startle. Or you may not startle, you may hear something and kind of wake up gradually, but what you will do is you will listen intently. You can't do anything else. You will listen for that sound again. If you hear it again, you'll start to tell yourself a story about what made the sound. So you hear something bump against the window, and you'll tell yourself, you'll listen, oh yeah, that was something bumping against the window. Then you'll tell yourself a story about what was bumping against the window, and you'll tell yourself, oh, it must have gotten windy outside. It must be a tree branch bumping against the window. If you believe your story, you'll go back to sleep. Neurologists call that a coherence story. Now, it may not have been, first of all, it may not have been a bump on the window that woke you up. It could have been a totally different sound. If it was the bump on the window that woke you up, it may not be windy outside. It may not be a tree branch. It might be a burglar. You don't know. But if you tell yourself it was a tree branch and it's windy and you believe it, you'll go back to sleep. Your stress level will go down. What you have done is you have told yourself a coherence story. The only way we can exist in life is by telling ourselves coherent stories. If we don't have coherent stories, we go crazy. If you walk out of here in 40 minutes and you go out there and put your key in your ignition and turn it and hear, what's going to happen to you? Stress hormones are going to flood through your body. And you're going to start trying to generate coherence however you can. You know, you're going to speed dial your husband or your teenage son or your favorite tow truck agency, or you're going to grab me or Elaine or Becky, or start seeing who has jumper cables in their car before everybody leaves the parking lot. You will figure out a way to try to reconstruct coherence. And if you can't do it, you're going to be in a world of hurt. What I'm telling you is your children are in a world of hurt. When they hear things in your home that they don't understand. Everything they hear is a thing that goes bump in the night if they don't know what's making that sound. That will make them either withdraw or get fussy or agitated. And if they get stressed by something, if they're afraid, they will withdraw, shut down, which looks like sleepy, but it isn't. It's sensory withdrawal. Or they'll get fussy agitated. If they're withdrawn or fussy agitated, they can't learn.
So is that is connected with the control, the ability to control your environment?
Yes, it is related to control. Every time they understand what makes a sound, they can communicate with you about what their needs are related to that sound. Like what Matthew does with that music that's aversive to him because it's too familiar. He can tell you, I don't want it. He likes the microwave sound. If he doesn't like if Jerry doesn't like the garbage disposal sound, then he can have some control over what happens in his environment by letting you know that, Mom, microwave's fine, go that way. Garbage disposal's over there, that's not fine, don't do that. You can at least postpone it. But here's how you create coherence. You can do something even better than postponing it. You can teach Jerry about garbage disposal. He will be less afraid if he just knows what that sound is and what's happening, and that there's a switch that makes it go on and off. He doesn't even have to be able to turn the switch. He just has to know that there is one, and then he can watch and see what you're going to do. Being able to predict the sound by where your hand is relative to the switch is control. Does that make sense? That's understanding. That's like me getting off the airport at Logan International Airport and knowing where the closest bathroom is. All right, creating understanding. That's what sensory motor stage learning is. And I said that it's the foundation level of learning for your children. Yes, we want them to go up that scale, up that sequence of skills as far as they can go, and we're always going to go for that. But this foundation has to be there, and you know what? It has to be there for us too. This is not just disability related. Nobody does well if they don't have that understanding, that environmental understanding of, it's that coherence is the word that researchers use for it, and it's that feeling of, this makes sense. So, cognition is acquisition, that's taking in sensory information, that's what that means. Storing it, that's long-term memory. And then retrieving it for a specific purpose, like Matthew learning to retrieve information about what a toothbrush does, and then using that information, in Matthew's case, opening his mouth. So taking in sensory information, storing it, retrieving it for a specific reason, and using it. That's what we're looking for. And with as many different objects, with as many different people, in as many different places as we can get. To move forward just a little bit. Okay. This is how we take in sensory information, and there are two internal senses that give the brain information about the body, and that's proprioceptive and vestibular. One's about where the body is in space, and the other one's about balance, and they're real important. But the ones that create coherence for what's going on in your home and your classrooms are what we call the 5 external senses. So we want your children to be able to take in as much high quality touch information, hearing information, vision information, smell information, and taste information as we can provide for them. When I talked about the quality of experiences, that's what I mean. We want to give them the opportunity to get information through as many of those senses as possible in regard to their interactions with things. So this may be, I think, maybe the most important thing I've told you. So the two things that I really hope you walk out here with. One is that you have to be neurologically in the quiet alert, active alert place for learning to occur. Secondly, that you have to have a high quality and high quantity of experiences when you're in that place where learning occurs. This would be the third most important thing I want you to walk out here with. And you may have to do some convincing with relatives, spouses, siblings. So be prepared to have to do some explaining on this one, because it isn't something that's commonly acknowledged in very many places with learners at the sensory motor stage. And it's this. This is not something that your children have any control over. This is a neurological phenomenon. It's highly researched. It's not anybody's opinion. This is just the way it is. There are 3 places where sensory information is processed in the brain, in the central processing system. When I touch something, it sets off receptors in my fingers if I touch with my hand. Electrical activity flows through the nerves in my arm to my spinal column. That electrical activity flows up my spinal column to the processing centers in my brain. And the same thing happens with vision. It sets off an electrical reaction that goes through nerves and goes to the processing centers in my brain. Same thing with taste, same thing with smell, same thing with hearing. So here's what happens when that electrical activity set off by experiences with things in the environment. Here's what happens when it gets to the brain. The first processing center is called the reticular center, and it's right down at the base of the skull. So that's where that electrical activity goes first. And at the reticular level, the electrical activity is filtered, and it's directly influenced by pain, light touch, head movements, sounds. That's the kind of stuff that's being reacted to at the reticular level. But here's the thing about reticular stimulation. It stimulates something called fight or flight. So if the electrical activity flows into the reticular system and something about the touch was painful or aversive, like light touch, most people don't like light touch. Some people do, but most people don't. Or certain kinds of head movements or sounds. If it gets to the reticular level and it sets off a neurological alarm, then it stimulates fight or flight. Fight or flight is fussy agitated. Fight is, if I have the motor ability to do it, I'll hurt you to get rid of it, whatever it is. You lightly brush my hair and my reticular system says, I hate it. Then I might try to scratch you, or that's fight. Flight is called neurological shutdown. It's withdrawal. And I mentioned before it looks like sleep, but it isn't real sleep. It's neurological flight. It's let me out of here. I can't stand this. So if everything's okay at that first processing center, the reticular part of the brain, if everything's okay there, then the electrical activity flows to the second center. The second center is the limbic processing part of the brain. And this is called, by researchers, this is called the emotional center. And literally, this is what happens. It's a little bit of an oversimplification, but it's not invalid. This is what happens. The electrical activity, when it gets to the limbic brain, which is kind of in the middle of the brain, flows into one of two piles. Now, I really, really want you to take this to the bank and be prepared to tell your grandparents about it. It flows into one or two piles. The one pile is, ooh, I like it. The other pile is, ugh, I don't like it. Now, it isn't as strong and as primitive an aversive reaction as the reticular reaction, but it's still a, I don't like it. If the electrical activity from what you're doing, the stimulation that you're providing, the interaction in the experience, if it goes into the I don't like it pile, it backflows. It goes back down to reticular and sets off fight or flight. Learning does not occur in those first two processing centers. Learning occurs in the third processing center, the cortex. So in order for the experience that your child has to get stored in long-term memory, so Jerry knows what the microwave is and what it does, and Matthew recognizes that music and knows he's heard it one too many times, or maybe 100 too many times, in order for that learning to get stored in long-term memory, that electrical activity has to get into the cortex. It has to go through reticular, through limbic, into the I like it pile, and then, boom, a magic door opens and it goes into the cortex. And learning can occur. So what am I telling you? I'm telling you that if your child doesn't like it, they can't learn. It is as simple as that. That is a neurological fact. I don't care how wonderful folding towels might be in terms of a life skill. If your child isn't crazy about folding towels, no learning is going to occur in a towel folding activity during which somebody manipulates their hands. Now, this is for sensory motor stage learners. Pre-operational stage learners, and you know this from your own children, when children get to be about 2 years old, they develop enough of a prefrontal cortex, it's called the executive part of the brain. When they're developmentally about 2 years old, you can start asking them to do some things they don't like, and they can learn if it's not too aversive. If it's just kind of like, really, Mom, but the sooner I do it, the sooner it'll be over. You can do that with somebody at the 2-year-old level. Before that, you know, it's like the little girl in the library who didn't get to take the videotape home with her. It's total meltdown. She doesn't have that executive function yet. She just can't do the reasoning that's required to handle something that's even mildly aversive. The best learning you are going to get with your sensory motor stage learners is with things they like. And we know that about typically developing infants and toddlers. The thing with your children is it's going to stay more true for them at much older ages. The more they like the thing they're having an experience with, the more likely learning is going to occur. So a couple of highlights, and then we need to do questions. Something that is an issue with many learners who are experiencing a lot of difficulty at the reticular and limbic levels. They're experiencing lots of sensory input that is either confusing or aversive, is that they try to deal with it by engaging in regulation, and the common word for that is self-stimulation. So is self-stimulation, I don't know if this is something that's an issue for you with your children or not. It can be, we all self-stim. Lauren's stimming right now. I'm sorry, Lauren, but you are. She's twiddling her foot. And one of my favorite stim behaviors is twisting my hair. I just got a haircut, so I'm very frustrated right now because I can't get a real satisfying clump to twiddle. Flicking, light gazing, rocking. Do these sound familiar? Do you have any of this going on? Okay. What you need what I would recommend you do is if self-stimulatory behaviors are occurring, then it's a sign to you that well, there are lots of different things that can be happening, but here are the two most common things. Some self-stimulation occurs when your child is not getting enough stimulation. So it'd be like Matthew's mom, if she went ahead and let the music play that he wasn't liking, and he's bored with it, he would have a choice to either shut down and provide some other kind of stimulation for himself, or to get fussy and agitated and go into fight or flight. Those would be his two choices. So some self-stimulation is a result of boredom. There's just not enough going on, so I'll provide something for myself. The other reason self-stimulation happens is the child is trying to calm himself down. That's the one I see occurring most frequently among sensory motor stage learners. Their environments are complex. They may be having difficulty with the complexity. They may be going into fight or flight. They're getting those reticular and limbic signals that, their cortisol levels are getting high. And what they do is they engage in some sort of self-stimulatory behavior to try to calm themselves down. Lauren, I suspect your foot shaking was more related to boredom for you, and the only reason I say this is that you've heard me say this now probably about 20 times. So, I don't see any obvious signs of stress with anybody right now, but you've got them. You can use them when you need them. We all do. So what do? Try as often as you can to engage your child in something that either calms him down if he's fussy, agitated, remember our arousal states? Try to engage him in something that calms him down, is soothing. Or if you think it is boredom, he's just been kind of hanging out, listening to his music for too long, and he needs something different, then try to engage him in something that excites him. You either are going to try to bring his arousal state up if he's bored, or down if he's fussy, agitated. Soothing and calming to bring him down, and exciting to bring him up. Questions? Comments?
Ethan does it a lot at night. It's almost to, like every 2 hours or so, he starts stimming while he's asleep. He has, and I don't know if it's because he used to have a trach here and he's used to that feeling or of comfort. I don't know what it is, but he hits like up in here. And it's almost like, I don't know whether it's when he's moving through stages of sleep or whether, I mean, we've tried weighted, we were thinking, okay, he's sensory seeking, right? So he's maybe coming enough out of sleep that he's sensory seeking. And we've tried weighted blankets and stuff, and he kicks them off and he doesn't want it. And so we can't kind of figure it out, but he's doing it while he's sleeping.
Is there anything dangerous about doing it?
Well, I get nervous because sometimes he's getting stronger and he'll just push right into the hole where the trach was. And I do it to myself and I think, oh. I mean, sometimes he makes himself cough because like he's pushed so hard.
Okay.
So it makes me worried. And the bigger he gets, the harder he hits, right? I mean, it's right here.
And have you talked with Ethan's doctor about it?
We have. We've even explored reflux and stuff like that, thinking maybe there's a.
It's just what I was going to ask you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he's on antacids and everything.
Any no sign of reflux?
Well, he did. He's had 2 surgeries to relieve it, and he's on medication for it.
Okay. It is often with many individuals. It is related to reflux, and if there's any difficulty with any issues regarding tissue damage or breathing concerns, what I have seen used most often is what's called an environmental accommodation, where he wears something around his neck. So, yeah, or a scarf, or I've seen those kind of modified neck brace things used, but he may not need that if there's no tissue damage or breathing problem. There is a type of self-stimulatory behavior that's very, very, very common as children are putting themselves to sleep. They'll soothe themselves with a self-stimulatory behavior. Sometimes it's squinching or some sort of rhythmic movement of the extremities. So that's very, very common in going to sleep. That sounds more reflex related to me, yeah.
I think it's become almost habit though, because during a work routine, you can tell at times that there's something going on internally. But during a work routine, when I'm requesting something that he's not really wanting to do, I can just see him starting, and then I just put my hand right there, and he looks at me like, come on. And then
Tammy, did you say when you're asking him to do something he doesn't really want to do?
Yeah, he's at the...
Then it's a stress response.
Well, no, he's at the pre-operational. He knows how to do certain things, but he would prefer to just sit and listen to his music.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't be asking him to do things, but even for a pre-operational level learner, when they're asked to do something they don't want to do, they do have a stress response.
Yeah, but I'll block his hand, and then he'll eventually, I'll just put his hand on top of the egg shaker. I just want him to pick it up and hold it, and then so he knows what I want him to do. He's just trying to.
And we say gentle hands, and he'll be like, gentle hands.
Yeah, all of those sound perfectly appropriate. He's clearly got enough executive function to handle it. So I didn't mean to imply by that you need to do anything differently, but it's still a stress response. You ask me to attach a picture to a text message, and I'll twiddle my hair.
Can you retrain? I mean, I know it's better to redirect, right, so that he's not stimming at all. But if he's gone he used to stim by punching into his hip, and I'd rather him be doing that than punching his throat. Not that I want to retrain his stim behavior.
Yeah, but, well, the most successful strategy is substitution. So if there's a self-stimulatory behavior, especially if it's a stress response behavior, that is something you really need to get away from because it causes tissue damage or because it's socially problematic, or, it's something you want to get away from, like, finger sucking or chewing on clothing, that sort of thing. The best thing to do, the most successful method is a substitution method. So yeah, if he needs to poke something, he can poke. I like what you said, that's fine. That works much better than inhibiting. So Tammy, you holding your hand up there to prevent him from doing it is fine as long as you get him back engaged with the task. But if you just stay there with inhibition, like you'll see sometimes,
It takes a split
yeah.
second,
And then he refocuses, he uses his attention skills, and you've got him back again. That's fine. Sometimes you'll see splints. Sometimes you'll see teachers hold the hands down on the table. Parents, I see, grandparents and siblings and parents do this sometimes. That's not a good strategy. The reason for that being that the neurological need for the behavior doesn't go away. If you don't switch attention to something else, then the neurological need to engage in the behavior stays there. And just inhibiting it without a substitution or a distraction actually increases the need for the behavior rather than decreases it. So distract and substitute, which is exactly what the two of you are doing. Yeah. So, Juanita, Megan, I forgot your name. Any other questions?
Any questions on when she gets frustrated, she bites?
Herself or you?
Anything.
Anything. All right.
Or anyone she can get a hold of.
Including herself? Okay.
To the point that she will, like Lindsay will tell you, she's called me before, like she will get like just red, like it just, I don't know how to stop it. So right now, like she wears like little like sweatbands on her, and
Yeah.
that's kind of helping a little bit. She's an oral seeker, so I've got any type of chewy under the
Yes.
sun, and she loves vibration, like so stimulating. But sometimes she'll even get so frustrated that nothing will help.
Oh, yes.
And that's just,
So, am I calling you the right name? Is it Megan?
yeah.
Megan, first thing I want you to be very clear about is that that's fight or flight. That is a very, very strong neurological reaction to distress. And she's not being a bad girl. She is telling you, her body is telling you that she's hurting. So what is the first thing to do then is to clearly identify what it is that's so aversive to her that it's sending her into fight and flight. Any ideas about what that is?
Well, at school, sometimes it'll just be, it can just be nothing. It can just come out of absolutely nowhere.
If it isn't environmentally related, that means it's internal. That means that something is happening inside of her body that's causing it, which could be something like acid reflux. It could even be, sometimes it's related to seizure activity. Do you have any medical information indicating that something like that could be involved?
She's had abnormal EKGs.
Abnormal.
Abnormal EKGs and EEGs.
Okay. It may very well be that that's what's going on then. And is she on medication? Oh, okay. Are there particular times of the day when it's more likely to occur than others?
Not really. I think.
What I would ask you to do, and Lindsay is the perfect person to do this with you, is there is an assessment tool in the Sensory Learning Kit guidebook called the Arousal State Profile. And what I would do as a first step, because that's so, I mean, my goodness, of course you want to minimize those occurrences as much as you possibly can. What I would do is I would do the arousal state profile assessment. And what you do when you do that, Megan, is you choose certain times of the day. Don't ever do more than 1 hour on a given day. But over the course of a week, try to do 5 different hours during the day. And during that hour, you code arousal states. So for Megan, how long do the episodes, for Abigail,
Right, you're fine.
how long do the episodes last?
It just depends.
Okay, if it depends, I would code states just for this initial one. I'd code states about once every minute. What you're going to do is you're going to end up with a profile at the end of the week of see if there's a pattern of activity from hour to hour throughout the day. When do you have a spike in episodes? When do you have fewer? And what that will tell you is, and this is how you manage things like that when they're internally driven, is that you make a schedule for her where you very, very intentionally have things that have very low demand during high spike, high intensity periods, and then target her teaching, target her when you're really going to go for quiet alert and active alert during those times in her day when she has the fewest episodes. With a learner with that kind of profile, that'll be the most important thing you can do at this point. How old is she?
3.
Perfect time to do it. Perfect time to do it. Hopefully there will be a pattern. When you do that assessment, you can take that to your neurologist and you can he has no way of knowing. But you can take and you can say, this is the pattern of activity that we're seeing. Sometimes medications can be adjusted and given at different times of the day so that low intensity times match up better with school. Arousal state profile, ASP. I hope you get something good out of that. I think you might. Anything else, my dears? I want to show you one little videotape before we leave, but I don't want to cut anybody off from any questions. You have probably heard your children's teachers talk about routines and how powerful they are to create high quality learning for learners at the sensory motor stage. And just to get everybody on the same page in regard to routines, a routine is an activity, but it's not just any activity, it's a special activity. An activity where you're just playing with your child and things happen randomly. And part of the fun of it is things happen randomly and you're both having a good time doing that. That's a fabulous kind of activity to do and you should never stop doing it, but it's not a routine. And the kind of activity that gets the most good stuff stored in long-term memory is called a routine. And Lauren and I were just talking about this in her classroom the other day for a learner who enjoys doing random activities, but who really needs to demonstrate achievement of specific skills in a more structured way. So here's what a routine does. A routine is an activity that's structured so the same thing happens the same way every time the activity occurs. And the power of that is that the learner knows exactly what's going to happen. They know what their part is supposed to be. So with Jerry, when he hears that ding on the microwave, now's the perfect time to say, okay, son, your job is to open it. And remember, he doesn't have to have the motor ability to open it. All he has to do is have the ability to tell you to open it. He has to have the intention. He has to show you he knows it's time to open it. How would he do that? He looks at you, he looks at the microwave, he looks at you, he looks at the microwave. He's already doing it, isn't he? Yeah, okay. All right. So those things happen best in a routine where the same things happen the same way every time. What that does is it builds up that understanding in your child's mind that they know what comes next, and they can start to think about how to make it happen. Control. So, to the extent that you can, having routines in your home will be a very, very good way to create understanding, that feeling of coherence, meaningfulness. I know what's going on. I know what's going to happen to me. I know what my part in it is. I know that in order to get that door open, I'm going to have to tell Mom I need her to do something. I want to just show you real quickly a young man named Adam. Adam is in middle school, and he's a great guy. Adam is just fantastic, and he has good attention skills. What Adam would love to do all day long, if people would just cooperate with him, is that he would sit and let them do things to him. And that would be just fine with him. He would enjoy it a whole lot. So here's Adam doing an activity with his teacher, Martha, and the goal that they're working on here is choice making. There are lots of things that they can play with, and Adam's job is to tell Martha which thing he wants to play with. Okay, that was great. He just told her he wants to play with a paint roller. Now he put his arm out. That's active alert. He initiated what's going to happen next. Now he's telling her that was enough. That's good communication. She's asking him if he wants more. She didn't give him a chance to initiate that time, though. She grabbed his arm too. Now he's initiating. When she grabbed his arm, he told her no. Then he told her he was ready for more. And he's happy, and all of that is good. That's active alert. And it's good communication skills. Now he's using a switch. Martha scoots away, and he's going to hit the switch if he wants her to come back. And he does want her to come back. So, now what Adam needs to learn is that there's more for him to do than just let Martha roll him. Good things are happening in that routine. Now Matthew has graduated, and he's becoming more active alert. What Martha is doing here, he has a basket of objects. This is a routine because it happens the same way every time. She presents the objects to him in the same sequence every time, and she models an action for each of the objects that she presents to him. What Adam is learning is how to imitate the action that she models. He's learning the cognitive skill of imitation. So this is a higher level of being active alert. So first she'll model rolling with the ball. She put her finger in it, he tried to put his in it, and he rolled it back. That's imitation. And that was an accident. But it was a good accident. Okay, so why is this important? There's nothing that Adam would like better than just sitting and never touching anything and never doing anything with anything and just letting people do things to him. So now what he's doing is he's engaging in a social behavior with the objects with his teacher, and he's doing what she's doing. This is a huge step forward. Now you're seeing 3 levels of instruction here. The first one was attention, paying attention to what somebody else is doing. This level is called exploration. That's where he's doing different things with objects. This is exploration. Adam graduates again to the 3rd level of instruction, which is function. And this is where he learns not only how to recognize objects, oh yeah, that red thing is the thing that rolls. Now he learns what an object is for, the use of the object. So one of his favorite objects in the basket is measuring cups that he bangs together. Martha bangs them together and he imitates and bangs them together. Now he's graduated to the level of instruction called function. And what he's going to do now is learn what the function of a measuring cup is. And he's going to do that in a routine that happens the same way every time he does it. And this is called a snack routine. Adam is going to make his snack. He has 3 containers, and he puts a scoop of the food items from each container in his bowl. That's a scoop of Cheez-Its. This is his first time to do it. And then he'll put a scoop of Goldfish and a scoop of popcorn. This is later on. This is a month later. Now he's learned how to take the lid off the container. Martha gets it ready. He's maintaining his grasp on the scoop, which he wasn't before. Now he actually tried to dip it into the container, the Cheez-Its. He's doing that with assistance now. Assistance is fine. And he knows that it's supposed to go in the bowl. We're just about through. And again, independently, he knows the function of the container. He takes the lid off. He knows he needs to hold his scoop. He knows he needs to dip it into that package. Let's watch him try. Martha's going to position it better this time. And he dropped it because he was trying to turn it down and aim it. Now she's in a better position to help him. When he tries to rotate his wrist, he can't maintain his grasp on it. But he's working on it. And in the bowl it goes. Here's a month later. He's maintaining his grip on it now while he's dipping it in the bag. Look at him hold on to it now. And now Martha wants him to dump it out. Watch him turn it. And sneak a bite. So why am I showing you this? Can you see Adam getting better at this? We're in the 3rd, is that obvious? We're in the 3rd month now. The only reason you need to remember this about your children. It's going to take them longer to build the skill that a typical learner would build. But when they have a routine, when they get to practice the same thing, the same way, enough times, you will get it. Adam you would never see this improvement if he wasn't working on it with the same materials, in the same place, the same way each time. Look at that boy pour and eat. Okay. Thank you all so much. I appreciate being here with you.